Hey, this is Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, the website for fathers because dads don't always think like moms. And if you're just tuning in, Great Dad Talks is a series of weekly conversations with new and expert fathers, all with a point of view on modern parenting. And as a coach, I'm always curious about how dads are evolving today. And I use that in my coaching, all of the great conversations. And you can find more about my services on GreatDad.com/coaching. And today I'm a topic that's really interesting to me. I'm talking to Adam Jablin, who is a coach himself, but also an expert in drug and substance abuse recovery. And we're going to be talking a little bit about teens and maybe teens and temptation, teens and what they're going through mental health wise in this change we're going through. So welcome, Adam.
Nice. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Sure. So when your publicist got in touch with me, I was just really curious at this juncture where we're at, people coming out of the pandemic. So all the focus is on that. But meanwhile, these kids have lived this last year or so stuck in this crucible, but they're also going through the typical stuff that kids do at this age. And we always hear about the kids, tragic stories about the kid who leaves mid-year, goes into a substance abuse program, or all kinds of other issues like that. But what I'm really curious about, I guess, is the kids that maybe don't get the attention and are going through these real crises right now silently, and it may be out of shame, out of fear that nobody wants to listen to them. Maybe they're dealing with a sexual identity issue that is impossible to talk about in their community, whatever. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So I know you do some work with kids, you do some work with adults, you do a lot on substance recovery. Is this time that we're living through any different in your point of view from other times for kids?
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic really took a bright light and shined on the epidemic of alcoholism, addiction, and all these triggers for children. Because now the kids, as you said before, were locked in their homes for a year. More attached to social media, more attached to Zoom, missing their friends, missing social interaction. And by the way, still having access to dibbling and dabbling and experimenting with things that will relieve that stress. So, I mean, it's sad, but people can look it up. There's been an increase in alcoholism, an increase in addiction, an increase in suicide, especially amongst teenage girls. It's a great time to be discussing this.
Yeah, because it's not only that, but parents have been worried for years about the influence of social media, which has to have amped up during this time period too. So if you ever had fear of missing out, I mean, you had 15 months of missing out basically. But I don't know if it helped that other kids were missing out at the same time, or whether you just assumed that somewhere kids were having a good time.
Yeah, there's that, and there's you mix in the social media with the accessibility to get these highly addictive substances. And like you said, there's a bunch of children out there that you don't see the issue. They're showing probably a smile, they're showing that everything's under control, but inside they're in turmoil. They're not sharing, they're not speaking what's really going on in their mind. They're full of fear, they're full of anxiety, and they're turning to substances or just negative behavior. So, as dads, it's a good thing to look at what these signs are and see what we can do to kind of bring it to the light.
Yeah. So if your son or daughter is, coming home or coming out of their Zoom room, or now it's the summertime, so people they don't have school, and they seem like same old kids, either in some cases they don't talk to you at all and that's just normal, or they do talk to you and they put a smiley face on it. Are there other warning signs that something is going on? Not necessarily substance abuse, but just, a mild mild case of depression that could lead to something else, or something else, other things that we should notice as involved parents, even if we think we're doing a good job talking to them?
Yeah, well, look, of course. And the ones that I'm going to mention are the ones that probably everyone can relate to. So, there's going to be isolation. At the other side of isolation, there's this over enthusiasm, like trying to show you that everything's great, everything's okay. There's weight gain, and on the other side of that, there's weight loss.
Right.
The main thing is to really, really communicate from your heart. What I've noticed with fathers and mothers, but I want to respect the house we are in, so to speak, is a lot of us still try to educate our kids with maybe a little lesson of our own life and a little bit of fear, right? This is what happens. This is where, and what I have found for fathers is if you speak from your heart, if you communicate from here and not your head and say, look, if anything were to ever happen to you, you don't know what that would do to my life. You just don't know. Rather than, these things are laced with fentanyl, and when I was a kid, it was okay. And they can't identify with that. Right. They just can't identify that, but they can identify with loss, and they can identify with pain, and they can identify with love. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what's been missing. My children don't want to hear about my rah-rah days. And by the way, I don't want to tell them. I'm in recovery for a reason. But they can identify with the fear and the pain of what if anything were to happen to my baby.
Right.
And so from the question of what can we look at from isolation to over-enthusiasm to weight gain to weight loss to speaking rapidly to speaking very slowly. And there are so many things, but you got to be able to communicate to your kids from your heart and not your head.
Well, it's interesting, though, some of those things, when you say them, like, yeah, obviously, if your kid is in the room, 18 hours a day and just comes out for meals, it'd be maybe something that's going on, but some of these things just seem like they're typical, that's teenager stuff. I mean, they do at 13, suddenly they're no longer hanging out with you in the kitchen. They're in their room all the time, or they are super enthusiastic and really wildly, hyper excited about a new band or a girl or, whatever the thing is. And then you don't know, is that verging into something to be aware of? And I don't know if in my experience, I've got a 17 and 21-year-old, and they're luckily they seem to be okay. But you don't know what is hiding behind the mask.
Paul, one of the reasons I was personally really excited to be on your podcast is that there's that old saying, like, nobody wrote the book on this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like nobody wrote a book on parenting. We're all doing the best we can. And now people like you, podcasts like this, we're getting that, we're writing the book. Yeah. We're giving it. So the idea is to be in tune, because nobody has the secret sauce or the telepathy to actually say, well, my daughter was moody today, and I think that means X, Y, Z. But if you're a good parent and you're a good dad and you're on top of it, you'll notice if it's consistent. Yeah. Now, if it's consistent, there may be some form of, dare I say, a dependency on anything, on social media, on food, on gambling, on shopping, on friends, on alcohol, on drugs. Now that you're paying attention, now we can start lowering the wall and finding a way to communicate.
Well, yeah, you and I are both coaches, so there are all kinds of coaching platitudes, like meeting people where they are, evolving with them, empathy. These are all like really the basic building blocks of communication and what coaches would try to tell parents. I still think the enigma is when, and maybe I'm trying to get a coaching answer out of you or an acceptance answer out of you, is that even with the best intentions, and I know communicating with your kids, meeting where they are, talking with them constantly, being vigilant about all the steps that you're just talking about, including the consistency part, which I think is a really good point, you can still miss key indicators.
Sure.
I just wonder if they're always lurking there.
I wish I was the guy to crack the code. I really do, because boy, oh boy, I'd walk on water. I would be the Messiah. You
Yeah.
know, every individual is different.
Yep.
You know, my parenting style wouldn't work for your 21 and 17-year-old, and your parenting style wouldn't work for my 15 and 11-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, the idea is that we bring the information and the ideas up to the surface and to the light, so people can kind of use what works for their household.
Yep.
You know, people with no spirituality are definitely going to parent way different than people that are devout Catholics, and people that are devout Catholics are definitely going to parent way different than people from Lebanon. I mean, it's so, but the fact is, all of these kids in this generation are attached to this and have access to things that we didn't have access to.
Yeah.
You know, so I wish I were the guy to say, oh, Paul, it's XYZ, but that guy's not alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is important to, like a lot of things, that being a parent comes with some inherent risk, and just the way you cannot control for the crazy drunk driver out of the street, you know, fluke accident or whatever. This is one of those things where, I mean, I don't want to give parents too much of a pass, because part of what we're saying is to be vigilant, but you have to be aware that things do happen, or things are happening that we do not see as parents. And our job is to be there for them.
I could also, look, let's be a little harsher at the same time, right? So let's give them a podcast that maybe they could chew on. Try to give them some permission slips, right? How's this though? Have the balls. If you feel something is wrong, right? You have an intuition. You have absolutely no evidence. Okay, you can't figure it out. Their phone is their phone, but there's something, you have the balls to speak to your kid one-on-one, eye to eye.
Yeah.
You know, dad to daughter, dad to son, and bring what you feel on the table.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy for us to do this as well. Oh, they're teenagers. You know what? It could be a thing. It could be a phase. Oh, they just went through a breakup. Oh, okay, right? That I'm trying to build a bridge to where the rubber meets the road of being overprotective and responsibility.
Right.
Yeah. You know, but you know, this is a show for dads, right? So, man up. You know what I mean? Like, have the balls to speak to your child, because no one else will.
Yeah, I think we can sometimes get, especially, that's why I wanted to really speak about these kids who are like, they are the good kids, you know, the ones who are doing well in school and everything. You know, you have the golden child that everybody talks about, or even not the golden child, you know, the kid who's just doing well, just a good, classically good kid who doesn't have all those warning signals. And yet somehow you have to, like you say, be the one who maybe breaks into that bubble and says, and doesn't put them up on a pedestal, but is willing to have that conversation with them if you think something is going in a different direction, just so that you start to have that conversation.
Absolutely. And look, let me use my own personal experience. It was, when I was a kid growing up, it was never comfortable when I knew that my parents were aware of my drinking, because I wanted to hide and lie about it, you know? And if we do good jobs as dads, it should make them uncomfortable that we're aware that something is up.
Yeah. Sweeping it under the rug, even if you're trying to be, you know, cool and hip and you're the easygoing dad and everything, not a good solution. So the part that I want to get into next is about being there for your kids, and being there so that they know they can go to you and you're going to be supportive. And the reason I'm very curious about this today is that with all the political correctness and all the words we're supposed to use and everything, there is this huge divide generationally between millennials and younger where they've grown up with a lot more sensitivity to some things that certainly I'm over 60. So my generation still was using words that if you heard them today, you'd have words for what type of person says those types of things. But we communicate to our kids constantly about what we see around us. So-and-so is gay, they just came out, or so-and-so just got sent to rehab or whatever. And the very way that we communicate to our kids, our reaction to that sets the stage to whether they think they can trust us to be supportive of them if they have any one of a variety of issues. And that can be the exact same things that you may be saying something negatively about one of these situations that I mentioned, but it could be something, minuscule. So they're reading us constantly. How does that resonate with you, or does, I guess I'm just as another dad, I'm just interested in that part of our conversational style and how generationally we maybe are different than our kids, and how we tell stories. I don't know if I'm being clear, I'm being as direct about this, but it's happened in our own household where you tell a story and you mean it to be kind of a story about somebody and the pain that family is going through. And you bring it up hopefully not to engage in Schadenfreude and make yourself feel better that they're having a crisis and you're not. But you bring up as a kind of a cautionary tale, but also because you care about this family. But at the same time, your child hears that as, there you go again. You're making a news story out of something that is just, a kid decided he's trans or has come out as gay. That is just life. That's reality now. It's not a news flash that let's all have a powwow about it and talk about it. It just is. And they read that differently than parents. So what do you think of that big word salad I just threw at you?
Well, I feel like you were, at my kitchen table yesterday with my kids.
Yeah. Okay.
How do I feel about it? I feel like my children are educating me.
Yeah. All the time.
And I'm learning and I'm growing. I'll give you an example. And I hope this answers the question, because what it's going to show you is I'm naive.
Yeah.
Okay. My daughter, there's a child. I need to make sure I word this politically correct. There's a child that is trans in her school. She knew him as him, and now he is her. And all of the girls are okay with her
right
now being in the locker room. And she did not have the full surgery yet.
And the parents are freaked out, probably.
So she's wired, genetically, she's wired as a man.
Yeah.
And she said, how do I feel about that? I'm like, I'm not crazy about it. I'm really not crazy about it. And she educated me on empathy and what this child is going through, and that all the girls are okay with it. And, I started feeling like, these families of when it must have been like, back in Vietnam, like, you serve your country, don't you dare run away from the draft, and you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, years later, these dads and moms are like, oh my God, we should have never been there. And, and I'm telling my kid to, this is such an interesting time, Paul.
Yeah.
I have a very liberal heart with very conservative values. I'm learning as I go.
Yeah, well, the history is different. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess trying to answer what was in what you said, your word salad. How could it not be a word salad? I wish we could express our thoughts linearly and it makes sense in a world that's changing so quickly. I mean, when I grew up, gender was not a thing. Right. Maybe sexuality was, okay, like what you prefer to, but not gender. And so I'm learning, and I can imagine, what those kids are going through and what kind of temptations they're dealing with to deal with their insecurities. I think, again, I don't want to be redundant, but communication. And I don't use me as the model, but I do think being open rather than being closed is healthier.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Doesn't mean I'm going to agree.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I'm going to agree on everything.
Right.
But at least I'm open to the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have to be really, as, slightly older parents, just be really hyper aware of how just the use of the word othering really captures what's going on today, and how our kids listen to that with a different ear than they would have when the other type of minorities were such small segments of the population that in the scheme of thing, for most people, it didn't matter because they were tiny groups, and they didn't have any sensitivity or empathy to how hurtful those things were. But now our kids are hyper aware of that, and even if you are ignorant enough to still be holding on to kind of antediluvian values and hateful word speech and all those prejudices and stereotypes that hopefully we're putting into the past now. The other reason is the fact that your kids may end up marrying somebody of a different race. Well, I certainly did, but or they may themselves be gay, or they may have a best friend who's in transition, and suddenly all those things that you think are in zest or in jest, or making just a little funny comment about somebody's appearance or whatever, they hear in a fundamentally different way than we did even 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. I saw this Saturday Night Live skit where the Godfather, right? He's sitting around and he just gets out of jail, and he's sitting around with all the his
oh right, yeah, I saw that one too.
The wise guys, and he starts calling these people by their name. How's
right? They're racist stereotypes, yeah.
Nicknames, and everybody at the table's like, whoa, we don't talk. What, I mean? And it was exactly what you and I are talking about right now. Yeah, we are in a transition to being a more understanding, empathetic, open world.
Yeah.
But I'm on the ride with you. I don't know what it's going to look like when it's over. All I do know is that my heart and my mind are opening up to such conversations and other people's values. I don't know what it's like to have a little girl that wants to be a boy, or have a little boy that wants to be a girl. I don't know what these people are going through.
Yeah. Well, the best we can do is to try to have an open heart and an open mind about it, and be empathetic to whatever degree we can be. But as parents, I mean, that's part of the communication thing, is providing that support now more than it ever has been, is being a good example in terms of your acceptance. And nobody's going to get this right. Nobody is going to get this right at first thing, but we have to be appreciative that we're evolving, I think. That's
a great title for if we were writing a book for dads. The subtitle would be "Nobody's going to get this right," because nobody's going to get this right. Nobody's going to get this right. We're a species all together, evolving and learning. Look, the times we're talking in right now, you were feeling me out before this podcast. Who are you? What you're about? Think about this real fast. We're talking about this. The Pentagon a week ago has said that UFOs exist, and it's not even news anymore.
Right. Yeah, if we thought that UFOs were going to unite us, I guess that one's off the table.
When I was a kid, this would have been huge. Okay? Huge. ET, this, that. This would have been, now it's like, oh yeah, there's UFOs. And in other news, Trump may come back. And then I'm learning as we go. But I do think as dads, it's just really, really important that we stay open and at the same time stay true to ourselves. I mean, I don't want to be a pushover. I do not want to be a pushover.
Yeah.
You know, I want my kids to love me, but also respect me.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's all. I mean, all you can do is do your best, show up, make sure that they feel supportive. And I think a new rule is in this is in how much judgment that we show to other people who are outside of our family is going to reflect on our kids' appreciation of how much judgment we would lay on them for any one of these behaviors, whether it's drug abuse or any other kind of thing that is outside of our historical knowledge of what we were like, and that's hard for us to empathize with. But
yeah, well, it also goes back to it goes back to that original question of the podcast, which is like, what can we look out for? It's almost as if in reality it's limitless. So you got to kind of go beyond the skin and beyond of even just warning signs that are so typical, and kind of go inside with an intuition.
Yeah.
And go with a feeling of what's really happening with your children, and have more of an understanding that it's not just, when we were growing up, it was alcohol and drugs. Now it's alcohol, drugs, gender, society, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and the list goes on and on and on.
Right.
So be open.
So for dads who are listening and are concerned about this, or think there is a warning sign, or maybe their child has actually asked them for some kind of help, what is the potential for even getting help right now? Because what I've heard is that that mental health resources are stretched to the limit because of the pandemic, and that people aren't finding the help they need. Like you and I are both coaches. Coaches usually take people who are kind of at level and try to help them find the next level. But if somebody is getting into that hole, how do you find resources for kids, or am I imagining a problem that doesn't exist? Maybe in big parts of the country there are lots of resources. Here in San Francisco, there's a massive shortage of mental health professionals right now.
I'm sorry to hear that, because state of Florida, we have an army ready to go. I work very closely with Dr. Rob Kelly, who I was telling you about. In Texas, in San Antonio, they have an army ready to go. So maybe it's a state by state thing we're talking about, because I didn't realize that in San Francisco. I know in New York, I work with several people there, and they're armed. They're armed and ready. So, this may be a state thing.
Well, I think it's an area. It could be areas of relative affluence where there's the shortage of trained professionals, but also going up against people who have the resources to get help.
Yeah, I do.
When the help isn't like acute. I'm talking more about the cases where you're worried about your child, or they've expressed the need to talk to somebody outside the family or whatever, and they need more, a weekly therapist visit for 3 months to just understand where they are in the universe, versus somebody who's going in for drug addiction treatment.
You're educating me now. What I had thought was I saw a lot more accessibility because of Zoom, and people willing to work and cross county lines and state lines. You don't need to necessarily find a psychologist or a therapist, whatever you're looking for, in San Francisco or in Florida. You can Zoom with somebody in New York. Now, granted, they may not be able to write a script. They may not be able to write a script. Yeah. But you can at least start the conversation and get things going. But this is a whole other podcast that I wish I had the answers for. I did not even know there was a shortage in certain areas.
Well, there are several websites where you can find online doctors. Maybe that's the solution to the problem. I think that there is a real value too in getting higher awareness among dads to yet another thing to talk about more openly than we would have before. Part of the communication thing is more normalizing mental health treatment from an early age. Not to say that your 7-year-old needs to go to a therapist, but to the extent where you talk about therapy being somebody for somebody sick versus somebody seeking understanding, I think colors the conversation too. And the more kids hear, especially as they reach adolescence or whatever, if you ever need help and you don't feel you can talk to me, there are other people you can talk to. I will help you find that without asking you, without demanding to know, why do you need to see a therapist? Why do you need to, talk to the priest or whatever? I will help you find that resource if you don't feel like you can speak to me yet about it.
That's the best parenting I've ever heard right there. Just letting your kids know that you'll help them get the person they can share with.
But again, I think that's generational, because a generation ago, somebody going to see a therapist, it was, that something's wrong with them. They've got a problem. And then everybody's whispering behind their back. And I know kids are really, they're so much more sensitive to that. I don't think that has changed generationally about it. But what they hate is hearing us talk about other kids and benchmarking other kids against them, or in relationship to them, or just as news items.
Well, I had to learn that last night. I had no idea that my daughter and her entire grade are pretty comfortable with this newer young lady who's wired like a man being okay in the locker room. Mm-hmm. And I had to listen to her. I had to
school you on that.
Yeah. Had to is even a strong word. I listened to her point of view, and, she was right. She ended it with like, you're not the one in the locker room.
Right.
And I was like, okay, good point. Fair, fair. So I'm being challenged, and I think it's a good thing. Yeah. I think it's a good thing. And as you and I, as coaches, it's healthy for us to be aware of what people are dealing with. Because you and I just never know what's going to come across, our phones, our emails. I work with a young girl now, she's 17, and none of the signs were there, except she was somehow masking her bulimia like a magician. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking masking it, like showing that she's eating protein shakes and berries and and buying vegan stuff, right? But no one knew she was throwing up every single time. We're learning as we go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot, and it's hard to know whether kids are more in pain than they were when we were younger, or whether we just hear about it a lot more. But I think we know the standards for us as fathers are far higher than they ever were, in terms of keeping a good finger on the pulse and just trying to, be where they are every day and have those kind of conversations, continue talking, don't switch the subject, even when it gets comfortable, and just trying to figure it out. Because like you said before, there's no manual on it.
No, there's no manual, and it really does, not to sound corny, but it really is all about, like you said, mental health. It all centers in the mind. Alcoholism is never about the alcohol. It's about what's going on in the mind. Addiction is never about the substance. It's about what's going on in the mind. Over shopping, over gambling, growing dependencies on supplements, and even this is wired to hit certain sensors in the mind. So we're actually touching on a really beautiful topic. The mind is not explored as we think it is. It's still, there's science that's still really, really new. We're learning that you could build new neural pathways within your own brain. And hopefully we could pass this kind of education to our kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been really a pleasure catching up with you about this, because gave me a chance to say a lot of the things that I wanted to, that I've been kind of working out in my own brain, trying to be sensitive to my kids, and still getting blindsided periodically, and just like, where did that come from? and seeing it and hearing, from other dads too, who are just like, I said this thing and it didn't seem like it was weird, but now when I think about it, it's just so much different when you see it from their point of view. So thanks a lot, Adam, for coming on. Adam, you can find Adam's website at adamjablin.com. That's Jablin, Adam, Adam, Jablin. And Adam works as a recovery mentor and does some business consulting and coaching. You can find his resources there. And I'm Paul Banis with GreatDad.com. If you're interested in our coaching services for new and older dads, you can find more at GreatDad.com/coaching. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me, Paul.